As usual, spoilers ahead for both Lobotomy Corp and Library of Ruina. Be careful, okay? Yesod, the Sephirot that lies near the bottom of the Tree of Life. It's right above Malkuth, but below Netzach and Hod. It's directly interpreted from Hebrew as foundation. It helps balance Netzach and Hod, and it heavily emphasizes transmission. It basically acts as a connector from the rest of the Sephirah and Malkuth, or rather a connector between the material world and the spiritual. The abnormalities on Yesod's floor, in my opinion, emphasize progression and depth. You can really tell from how Yesod's abnormality pages are really broken. I mean, how they highlight killing efficiently. Chained Wrath, Clean, Musical Addiction, The Seventh Bullet, Dark Flame Request. They're all pages that either help in clearing out enemies quickly and competently, or pages that reward the librarian for doing so. In my opinion, it's a representation of the disturbing nature of efficient killing and progress at all costs. But that's kind of rough, to be honest. Take that with a grain of salt. Though I doubt that's what you're here for. So let's actually start talking about him. Yesod runs the information team, which processes and archives the data of Lobotomy Corporation, along with manipulating and destroying less flattering information. As you can tell, their role is pretty important, especially when it comes to information about the corporation or abnormalities. When you meet Yesod, he's strict and formal. Literally, the very first line of his dialogue has him chastising you for not being up to par. This first meeting also showcases his by-the-book nature. Regardless of what he would like to do, he follows the rules that were provided to him instead. He then provides a self-introduction. This late introduction shows one thing. He will always put standards and the rules first before anything else. At this point, he seems like a regular person who leans to being a workaholic. He's straight-laced and fairly sensible. He's very confused by the others working at L-Corp. Why doesn't everyone else follow the rules? They're there for a reason, especially in a place like Lobotomy Corporation. A place where death is the norm. Why do they constantly break regulations and guidelines? Why risk accidents? After that, he accentuates the value of information at L-Corp before going into something a little strange. This little deviation plays a similar role to the end of Malkuth's first story. It introduces an element of doubt into the character. Malkuth first seemed cheerful and friendly, but had that put off by her ruthless responses and the way she acted. While Yesod portrays himself as pragmatic, he actually reveals an irrational fear of having parts of his body exposed. Though after this, ProjectMoon chooses to reinforce his rationality once again, having Netzach come in before Yesod shuts him down. And last of all, his first story concludes with his nickname, Yesod, the Viper. He's actually surprisingly insecure about the topic, which is Yesod's final and most intriguing trait. Regardless of that, he quickly moves on to finish his work. All of Yesod's common themes have already made their appearance. In his arc, the traits that are particularly emphasized are rationality, who would have thought, detachment, and the festering of emotions. Regardless of what he wants to do, he'll always try to be as by the book as possible, like when he refuses to penalize you due to the Sephirah manual. It's something he desperately tries to keep up, and he's both detested and praised for holding this trait. Unfortunately, it's something that starts falling after your interactions with him. Detachment, while present in your first meeting, is only emphasized afterwards. Sympathy is shallow and does no good. He's not the one in danger when an employee works with an abnormality, so all he can do is try to minimize the amount of casualties. This puts him at odds with other Sephirah. In particular, Hod. He directly clashes with some of her ideals and even goes out of his way to describe his distaste for her ideas. Over time though, both of these things are actually explained. He once had an employee who he would consider a friend. At one point, he looked the other way for this employee, allowing them to work on abnormalities even though at that point in time it would have broken the rules. The results speak for themselves. 2 abnormalities were intentionally released from containment, causing the deaths of several employees and clerks. This incident led to his detachment and strict following of the rules. Well, it was one of the contributing factors. Accidents may happen, but this wasn't an accident. He made a mistake, which caused problems. Something that would have been easily avoided if he had just followed the rules. If he never had desire for companionship. So he bottled his emotions up. What's the point of letting those out if all it does is cause problems? This leads to his third and final trait. The festering of emotions. It doesn't show. Not at first. But over time, it gets harder and harder to control. At first, it's just a hallucination. The sight of his skin covered with pus and boils. Of course, that isn't real. His body is still completely intact. But that isn't how he feels. Every single time, he's asked to expunge an employee's name from the records. Every time he's forced to introduce himself as the Sephirah of the information team, he feels disgust. He doesn't understand why he is the way he is. If emotions and sympathy will only cloud one's judgment, why did the architect of Lobotomy Corporation force these emotions upon him? Yesod himself originates from Gabriel, someone known for valuing rationality. Some even said that he completely lacked empathy. They were wrong. Lacking empathy and not showing it are 2 completely different notions. This is what makes Yesod fairly relatable for a lot of us. If you constantly bottle up your emotions, suppressing them for the greater good, which, let's be real here, is the norm nowadays, you probably really enjoyed Yesod's development. Gabriel eventually falls apart. Regardless of his attempts to keep himself together and follow his ideals, all that did was destroy him on the inside. His objectivity revolted him. Why couldn't he do anything? Why couldn't he express what he wanted the most? Why couldn't he truly say, I don't want to see anyone else die? And even then, why couldn't he stay truly objective? Why still did his emotions leak out? He felt so disgusted with himself that he started wearing long-sleeve clothing to cover himself up. And before long, he starts scratching himself to the point where he has to be tied and bound. He felt tainted. After, he was left alone and no one saw him again. Yesod's arc ends on a slightly bitter note. He still feels like he's rotting on the inside. He still feels a deep self-loathing. And he will still feel a strong and unbearable anger for you. But still. he's granted a new understanding. His past hurt to remember, but at least now he can understand that it's not all for naught. That in the end, what's important isn't just rationality, but rather the rationality to be able to do what you can. The start will be tough, but he will try his best to help you on your way to accepting your past. As usual, I'll be talking about non-ProjectMoon related media here. If you want to skip ahead to where I talk about Yesod, there's a timestamp on screen. You know, I realize that these tend to be quite sad a lot of the time, so I'm gonna try to switch things up a little, and I'm gonna talk about Yowaneha Haki. This song follows someone who stays solely in their comfort zone. Someone who simply follows guidelines and lives by the book, going through each day without really thinking about anything and feeling like every day repeats itself. The singer laments their surroundings but feels too cowardly to do anything about it. They simply bottle up their thoughts so they're just like everyone else. They know they're a weak human being, but after a long time, they decided to make a change. They take a step out of their comfort zone, and even though it's gonna be tough, even though they are now fully responsible for their actions, it would be better than just living by the rules. That's what it means to have the rationality to maintain discretion. That despite the risks of incidents and casualties at LCOP, Yesod should be willing to maintain his own freedom and use his own judgment, taking responsibility, rather than relying on a manual all the time. Also, a seed of hope can blossom. Which is why his last line talks about maybe applying penalty points to you as well. While rules and guidelines matter, decisions should still be made with discretion. In Library of Ruina, Yesod plays a slightly different role. While he's still rational and calm, his disgust and emotions show a lot more, displaying his progression from Lobotomy Corp. For example, he straight up calls Roland Angela's lapdog at several moments, and he doesn't bother hiding his disgust and contempt for what he's forced to do. And can you blame him? Can he truly believe that what he's doing right now is for the greater good? Unlike Malkuth, who grows and changes a lot in Library of Ruina, Yesod mostly remains the same, with one main moment where he develops, where Roland advises him to just put up with it one last time, to look at what he already has and be thankful for it.
한 번만 더 참아보자고. 이번엔 다를지 모르잖아. 그리고 로보토미 때와 지금을 비교하면 하나쯤은 나아진 게 있지 않나?
그렇습니다. 적어도 제 지시를 따라주던 예전 직원들과 함께할 수 있습니다.
그렇게 점차 바꿔가다 보면 뭔가 달라지겠지.
롤랑의 말이 맞습니다. 나아진 게 없는 건 아닙니다. 더 나아질 수만 있다면 언제까지고 참아보도록 하죠.
This reinforces the overt message of rationality but doesn't take away from his discretion either. He's allowed to feel horrible for what he's doing, but at least taking a look at the bigger picture, maybe, just maybe, things will turn out better this time. In The Flaw of Technology's realization, Yesod emphasizes the importance of not the ends, but the means.
하지만 부여받은 원칙에 얽매여 그 이상을 보지 못한다면 그것이야말로 본말 천도입니다.
Which can be connected to other parts of the flaw of technology, but that's a video for another time. What is important is that your suppression of his meltdown has clearly had quite an effect on him.
그래도 엔젤라, 이제는 선택할 수 있습니다. 그리고 저희 대신 당신이 대가를 치러준 만큼 저도 돕고 싶군요. 언제나 모든 것이 변화하는 세상에 살고 있으니까요. 정해졌다고 반드시 따르는 것이 이성적이고 현명한 것이 아닐 테죠. 세상이 변화하는 만큼 우리는 늘 분별할 수 있어야 합니다.
그래. 다 맞는 말이고 그럴싸한 말이지. 넌 자기가 무슨 말을 하는지 제대로 알고 있나 궁금하네.
And this message Angela still remembers by the end of the game. You do not need to fulfill your obligations in the expected manner. Only you have the freedom to make your own decisions using your volition, judgment, and feelings. You might feel cornered. You might feel like there's only one way out and that there's nothing you can do. But there might be another path that you can take, and I know how naive that sounds. Even if it means breaking the rules. There is no such thing as something you must do, as long as one maintains their discretion. I'm not telling you to break rules, of course there's sensible and non-sensible options. But sometimes, it might be better to use your own judgment and make your own decisions. You do not have to always maintain the status quo. As always, thank you for sticking around till the end. Make sure to visit again, yeah? See you around.